risks, and also great opportunities. And our job together is to shine a brighter spotlight on those opportunities for more of the world to see. To do that, we have a look at global politics and global trade from the perspective of countries that are rewriting the rules of both, and Qatar's position between Europe and Asia and growing in strategic significance is the perfect vantage point. We've come together here to host a dialogue, propose solutions, and amplify the voices of forward-thinking leaders from across the Gulf and around the Great South. Given the group we've assembled, I expect we'll have a productive 3 days. We have some special events to kick off this morning. First, we are honored that our next speaker could participate in this year's Qatar Economic Forum. I was glad to meet the Prime Minister several years ago in New York, and we all saw his leadership on the international stage when he helped to present the thrilling World Cup here last year. His investment experience with Qatar's Sovereign Wealth Fund gives him a valuable perspective, both on capital flows and Qatar's push for sustainability, including its investments in solar parks both here and abroad. He also brings an independent streak to diplomatic relations, which I always appreciate, and as well as a global perspective on the challenges we created this forum to reckon with. We're grateful for his partnership. Now, that's a nice round of applause. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency, the Prime Minister.
In the name of God, the merciful, the most compassionate. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to welcome you in the third Qatar Economic Forum. This forum is an important platform to discuss the most important challenges, economic challenges that are faced today, and in order to look for solutions in the spirit of cooperation and innovation. The world has witnessed or suffered a lot in the last 2 years, starting with COVID-19 and its impact on the global economy, in addition to armed conflicts across the world which have had their impact on multiple societies, as well as the climate change which affects the countries and societies. However, human beings are made to adapt and adjust to overcome challenges and create opportunities. Human beings have been guided by stars, crossed oceans, and have carved mountains. They are capable today to overcome these challenges and to realize or reach an economic growth to advance its society and world. The world has never witnessed a technological or a technology revolution such as the one we are watching today. Our responsibility as government and companies is important. History and the future generations will witness or will look at us and how we will manage these knowledge and resources. I hope that your presence in Qatar will constitute an opportunity to look for a brighter future. For us, we must look forward and move forward, building on the lessons learned. This is a strategic decision and choice that we follow in our national and development strategy. We have a resilient economy, and we managed to maintain high competitive rates despite the crisis. We have a strong health system, and all this is not by chance. They are the result of a wise vision of our leadership and years of planning and our belief in our human capital, in addition to providing the necessary capacities in order to diversify our economy. We have had the best version of World Cup, Football World Cup, for the first time from an Arabic country. And we continue moving forward and promoting the positioning of Qatar as an international partner, a trusted international partner, a source of clean energy, achieving with that our 2030 vision built on a transition into a diversified and innovative economy. This requires of us planning, resilience, and perseverance. In this framework, we have achieved a 9.9% growth in non-oil sector, as well as 4.8% in the oil sector in the first quarter of 2022. Our national efforts have led to establishing strong financial institutions and building an encouraging environment for business. We also have achieved an increase of local and foreign investment in the field of diversifying economy. And as part of our diversified efforts, we have opened the first solar park in Qatar that is expected to provide 10% of the national electricity in peak times. Based on our responsibility, international responsibilities, we made sure to sustain the energy supplies and its stability in the world. Understanding the role, the big role of small and medium enterprises in achieving prosperity, we constantly work on supporting these companies in order to promote the entrepreneurship. The Qatar Investment Authority in this framework contributes in guaranteeing an economic stability for the coming generations through investing in companies and sectors that support local Qatari industries and help transfer them to world markets. We also look to attract high-quality investments that support local and international societies. Ladies and gentlemen, the policies and projects that we have had through the last 2 decades helped us build a strong, stable infrastructure in a strategic location linking between the East and West. Qatar hosts the best airport, the best airline in the world, one of the biggest green ports in the world, and the first 5G commercial network. We also have one of the most resilient wealth funds. These proud achievements are what motivate us to keep working in order to maintain our position in the world market and to propose solutions for improving them. Ladies and gentlemen, supporting economy, investment, and innovation, in addition to promoting the common or joint human values of and keeping peace, is the way to build the necessary capacities to overcome challenges we face today and through working together and exchanging information. We hope that through this forum being held under the title A New Global Growth Story, we hope to contribute in creating a new path to support businesses and investment environment, to bring them to new horizons of development and increased cooperation and coordination between countries, international institutions, and social society in order to reach the economic solutions. Let us make this forum a chance for coordination, discussion, and for building partnership that increase our chances for an economic growth, a world that is more prosperous, and let us admit that coordination and cooperation makes change. Thank you all and welcome in Doha.
Please welcome to the stage His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabasaja.
Your Excellency, for being here and for joining us. We're opening up the Qatar Economic Forum, so really appreciate your time. So I want to start here with the fact that we are in Qatar. It is our host city, and Rwanda in particular has called Qatar a strategic partner. You've talked about how you want to enhance the relationship with this host country. Talk to us about what that looks like for you in the next few years.
Well, first of all, we have to be aware of the world we live in, and in it we have to invest and grow, and there's no country that can manage that alone, and particularly for a small country like mine, we therefore have to be having a vision of what we want to do, and then forge these partnerships, like indeed you've pointed to one of the strongest partners we have for Rwanda and for Africa, actually, is Qatar. And it was a partnership of choice that we made. We scan across the world. There is this region, the Gulf region, and you know there has been it's very clear, if you look up to the Gulf region, India, Southeast Asia, on the map, certainly these are growth leaders, right, and also provide, therefore, a huge opportunity. Right. And therefore, for us, there are key areas we look at when we are trying to make these investments, where it is and we are looking at market leaders, right, in different areas. Right. For example, with the Qatar, we are partnering in aviation. Right. Qatar Airways is a leader in this sector. Right. And we have been looking at other areas where we can work together with other countries, but we have the opportunity to work very strongly with. Right, and we saw Qatar Airways actually open up the first cargo hub in Rwanda, but there's also a plan for Qatar to partner with Rwanda for an airport. Can you talk to us about where you're at in negotiations, when we'll actually see the building begin? We've done all that with the negotiations, and we are actually implementing what has been done. We are partnering in the airline, but also in the airport right, that we are jointly investing in. Work is in progress. We've gone a long way. We're just trying to speed it up to make sure that we are already up and running. What could we potentially see by the end of this year in terms of development with this airport? By the end of the year, say, the airline is very strong already. It's growing very fast. The airport, maybe we should be around 70% of that done. And I guess in the next year, sometime in the third or fourth quarter, we shall be seeing things standing and going. And we know, I mean, you mentioned some of the partners that Rwanda is working with. I think it's all clear to everyone just how much of a tourism and investment destination that Rwanda has become. You mentioned the Qatar Airways partnership. There was also the renewed partnership with the Premier League team, PSG. Some of your critics, though, say that a lot of these partnerships are just to mask some of the human rights concerns in the country. I mean, what do you say to that? Well, I would have been surprised if you didn't bring that up, because that's the talking point of every. But this discussion is about economic partnerships, it's about growth, it's about. So let me tell you briefly what we are about. I mentioned that we are seeking partnerships with market leaders. We talked about aviation. We have invested also in, and with Europe, in biotechnology. We have, in fact, we are now beginning to manufacture, maybe starting with August, vaccines. We are working with BioNTech. Yes, we are also partnering with NBA for Basketball Africa League, which is based in Rwanda, and so on and so forth. So, in fact, by making progress on this front, the economic front, and providing for our people, we are dealing with human rights issues. Because the basic thing is the needs of people. That's what we are looking at. The second area we are looking at is innovation and startups. And we are having partnerships in these areas as well. For example, with innovation and the startups, we have one of a kind for drone precision delivery. Right. You have heard of a company called Zipline, yep, which started in Rwanda, and we are working together, and it's a company that is growing across the continent and beyond. And then you have Norsken. It's a Swedish company. It has established a hub in the East African region, and they are helping startup companies, and they have created a technology hub in Kigali. So really, this is the medicine for answering the human rights question.
Is it the medicine, though? Because we've heard from a number of countries talk about just how concerned they are about the stability of the region in particular when it comes to Rwanda and Congo and the human rights situation. So is it the medicine? I mean, what is it that you're actually doing for the local communities there to better the situation and not spill out into an all-out war?
It's the medicine, because we may not be able to stop problems of instability anywhere in the world. They have different causes, and they have to be addressed differently, as you see across the world, in actual fact. Yeah. But you are talking about Rwanda or our region. I don't think you imagine that the source of instability of the region, whether it is Sudan or Somalia or beyond, like in Central African Republic, or terrorism we had in Mozambique, is all coming from Rwanda. I don't think so. But for the problems between Rwanda and DRC, that has a process that is addressing that.
Where's the process at right now?
The process is led by Angola and also the East African region. We have two processes, one of Nairobi, another of Luanda in Angola. Mm-hmm. And these discussions are going on. In fact, the African Union itself is dealing with the matter. And the UN, which has been there for the last 20 years, mm-hmm. You would imagine maybe with the amount of money spent there and the time spent, we would actually not be having problems since the UN is a leader in trying to help to create peace.
Are you willing to meet with President Felix Tshisekedi about the conflict that's happening?
We have met many times over that, and we shall continue, but I have indicated to you that we have frameworks in which we are working. Mm-hmm. So I don't know of any problem that you have in your mind about meeting, but we've been meeting several times.
Do you see the conflict coming to an end soon? I mean, Rwanda is going to have elections next year. I mean, is this something that you're committed to seeing end while you're still in office?
I'm wondering if you're imagining that if there is a problem like that involving countries or people and for different sorts of causes, that there is one person that has the key to addressing the issue. But maybe one person or one country is part of the solution, but is not the solution, but they will contribute to that. So I think maybe we can continue with the discussion in the context of why we are here, and then we leave the matters to be handled by those who are already handling it.
Let's also talk about, because you mentioned we are here, the Qatar Economic Forum. Rwanda has, at a time when a lot of African countries have not been able to pay back debt, has been able to pay back a $400 million Eurobond. Do you see the country potentially going back to the international market soon? I mean, what is it that you are having discussions with your officials?
Whenever there is a need, we will always go back.
How much would you be?
Well, it depends on the problem we want to address. Maybe, but we don't go back maybe for the same, we go back for more because we've been growing. We have investments to make in infrastructure. We have investments to make in the area of manufacturing, as I have mentioned to you. Yep. We are busy building a country, so we will need resources which will always not be available until we go to the market. So we first of all, we wanted and we have been able to establish ourselves as people that are reliable, that can pay our debt. That's key. So we want to build on that and continue doing more. We don't go to the market or borrow for the sake of it. We want to invest in those sectors I have mentioned to you that will have good returns and justify our investments, and also contribute to the well-being and the development of our people.
There's a lot of concern, though, when we talk about investment and extending financing with African countries, that there's unfair treatment when it comes to financing. Do you think developed economies need to rethink how they're extending financing to African countries, especially when you consider, what's happening in Ghana and Zambia? I mean, do you think there needs to be a rethinking of how this is working?
Well, we need to be rethinking, but we also need to be finding ways of doing better than probably we have had in the past. And part of it I have just mentioned, and that is the borrowers and the lenders have to be focusing on that which makes sense to them, especially the borrowers have to. Which areas do you really want to cover? Where do you want to invest this money so that you can easily see predictability in the growth and returns? So
it's more on the borrowers, less on the lenders.
It is always going to be a conversation. It takes a conversation to get things clear. But in terms for Africa, when you look at the setup of things across the world, and when you see what happened during COVID, for example, and the effects it had, and then climate change issues affecting, converging on that. And when how we came out COVID, there was, for example, a discussion as to how the CDRs would be used to fill the gap. Well, there was agreement that that is the case. The special drawing rights should be looked upon to alleviate on some of the problems. But Africa had a very small part share of that, and that is about 33 billion, when actually the estimated amount would have gone over 100 billion. But at the same time, money is actually there. Those who got the drawing rights, who drew from that,
Right.
they didn't even need it. The developed countries didn't need that amount of money. And the IMF did their best to say we can actually draw from this and support the African struggling economies to come up, which, by the way, has impact on the overall global growth,
Right.
if it really came up well. So there has been a discussion, endless discussion about this, and we haven't come to the point where we can tap into this. So there is a discussion that must be held that actually is aimed at resolving issues rather than just dilly-dallying over them and continuing with the same problem.
Right. And before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about the UK migrant situation and its partnership with Rwanda. We heard from a UN agency saying that sending asylum seekers may potentially put them in harm. I mean, why is it that you're so keen on this deal? What is the benefit that you see in this for Rwanda?
Well, first of all, we did not really beg anybody to work with us or to send migrants to Rwanda. It's an idea that developed to solve a problem. And migrant issues are about human capital gaps that exist and have these movements, but the origin can also be instability in different parts of the world. And the partnership, therefore, was forged around saying, how do you address this problem? And there came a development partnership around that, which would mean resettling the migrants who need to settle down and, you know, have the freedom to do what they want to do in places that they are stable. And in fact, the current UK migration problem that is being talked about came later. We started with the resettling and receiving people from Libya who were stuck in Libya because of instability that developed in Libya, and there were many Africans coming from different parts of Africa,
Right.
caught up in Libya, heading to Europe.
Right.
And we have, it started in 2018.
Right.
And we have had a number of them brought to Rwanda, processed. Some stay, others have gone to different countries. But it was done proper and saved thousands of lives who were caught up in that situation. So from that, learning from that, that is how the UK, and there are other actually European countries that have been contacting us
Right.
to address this.
Other European countries
Yes.
looking
there-
into
there
this.
are-
So before we're a little bit over time. Do you see this UK situation potentially going through by the end of the year? Do you believe that migrants will actually start being sent to Rwanda by the end of 2023?
Well, maybe a bigger part of the question should go to UK because for us to receive them and process them working with UK, we are ready. UK has to be ready on their part, and that's how it works, and for overall good results.
All right, great. We have to leave it there. Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time. Thanks to everyone. For
Thank
listening.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Please welcome to the stage His Excellency Saad Sharida Al Kaabi, Minister of State for Energy Affairs for the State of Qatar and President and CEO of Qatar Energy, His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman Al Saud, Minister of Energy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and His Excellency Hayyan Abdul Ghani Al Sawad, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Oil for the Republic of Iraq, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix.
Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, thank you so much for joining us. We have 27 minutes to rethink the global energy complex. I know you do this every day. You are experts in your field. You, of course, have a lot to say about what we'll see ahead. The economic
And any
recovery.
chance for making it 3 minutes?
In 3 minutes. I'm not sure we'll even get the first question in 3 minutes. Your Highness, when you look at the energy complex right now and what we're seeing in China with the economy, a lot of concerns about a US recession, where are we? Does it vindicate OPEC's decision to cut production in the last quarters?
But I want to assert a much better vindication. First of all, I'm very grateful for the attendance of His Royal Highness Sheikh Tamim. It's been an honor to be here, although I don't call myself a guest. I'm part of this country and part of the family. And I intend to compete with the Saudis and both men and women who came to the World Cup and brought joy and passion and demonstrate that joy and passion and love for this country and its people. So where I am and what I am here for is that and that precisely. The other things are details.
Details that change, of course, the energy complex for everyone.
Yeah, but you know, we are relaxed people. We take things in a different latitude. We are focused on the bigger picture. Yes, the nuances of the day and tomorrow and after tomorrow are crucial, but we deal with them tactically. We in Saudi Arabia do have a vision. It's called 2030. This is our main drive. Everything revolve and evolve around it. So whatever, if people sometimes ask what they intend to do here and there, all what I need to tell them, just go back and read what we have put together in that vision. And you will find all of your answers. Now, in today's environment, my colleagues here will tell you that we are dealing with such a volatile situations. Almost all of them have been generated and created for nothing that we have had anything to do with. However, realistically, we have to handle it and deal with it in an amicable way, again, but not losing sight of our future trajectory. It is unfortunate that we have to be vigilant, we have to be proactive, as we have in OPEC Plus have been saying for quite some time. I think the three adjectives that people need to continue to remember is being proactive, preemptive, and the new word that we have injected in our language is we have to also be hedger of what may come, not necessarily that we are issuing a judgment about it, but the message I would like to bring here is that the whole world needs not to forget that we have a future, and we should be brave enough, courageous enough to attend to that future without continuing the so-called kicking the can policies, those policies that may allow us to fend the situation for this month, next month, or even the month after. But with that, we're losing sight of our intentions and our more extreme important objectives.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Abdel Ghani, when you look at the trajectory that we could see in terms of supply and demand for oil over the next 12 months, how do you see it going? Are you concerned that there's not enough demand from places in the world?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أنا سعيد أن أكون في هذا
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, I'm so glad to be with you in the Economic Forum. This is my first participation in this forum. As far as your question is concerned, and as far as the latest agreement of the OPEC and OPEC Plus, we, the representatives of Iraq, we are committed to put into place the results and the outcomes of the last meeting. We are committed to reducing, the oil supplies, but without affecting the world economy. As you may be aware, Iraq, despite all the economic problems that we have been through, but we have been always committed to abide by the outcomes and by the results of the OPEC meetings. And we have always endeavored to keep the stability in order to help the growth of the global economy. Realistically, the first agreement that we have embraced and that started in December 2022, we were committed to what we said. We are committed to reducing, the production. I'm talking about the Iraqi supplies. And at the same time, we are also committed to the latest agreement. OPEC, this pertains to the latest agreement of the OPEC Plus. And there is a commitment from all the participants. And thanks God, we have been able to keep the stability. We didn't affect the world market adversely, if I might say so. And at the same time, of course, the supplies are good, and we can see that there is a stability. We are committed, as I said, to the latest agreements, and there is no scarcity in the supplies.
Thank you so much, Minister.
Shukran jazilan.
You see more scarcity in the future. Minister, of course, your focus is on gas. Can you tell us whether you're on track to increase production of LNG by 60% by 2027, and whether you can also surpass that, given the need for gas in the world?
First, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this panel, and I'm honored to have His Highness and all the guest leaders attend our panel. Regarding the gas development and the future, we see as a big picture, you were asking about supply-demand. We think that there is going to be a big shortage in gas in the future, predominantly due to the energy transition push that is, we would say, really very aggressive without studying it properly. Because if you look at economic stability and environmental responsibility, they're not mutually exclusive. You have to have both. And when you push some countries to doing that, and you ruin their economy, I think that doesn't help humanity in general. If you look at the future, whether it's gas or oil, there is going to be a shortage due to the decade-long lack of investment, whether it's in oil or gas, due to this push for the transition. I'm thrilled, actually, that finally the G7, in their final communique, have said that we need more LNG to be supplied to the world. We've been saying this for the last 10 years, and we're actually implementing what you just mentioned. We're producing 77 million tons per day of tons per annum of LNG today. We are going to go to 126 million tons in Qatar, and it's on track. All the contracts have been awarded to start in 26. In addition to that, we have about 18 million tons that will be coming from our project in the US, Golden Pass Terminal. So we're adding 65 million tons to the world's needs. When people were saying we didn't need it, I'm happy the G7 now agree that we need even more.
So would you also be prepared, would you be able to put more production if the world needs it? Because this is something that, as you say, the G7 said for the first time.
Yes. We don't follow what people say we should do. We do what technically is possible for our fields, but we always will have a track. We will have a plan to look at what we can do in the future, and when it's the right time and technically we can do it, we'll definitely do more.
Your Highness, how do you see supply and demand changing in the next 2 years?
Just as a follow-up with Saad, you know, unfortunately, I'm known for being quite a cynical, sometimes sarcastic person. So it's not all about switching the valve, turning the valve, tilting the pipe. These things takes a lot of time and a lot of investment. And for investors to do what is needed, they need certainty. We have a huge certainty gap. That's the real picture. Again, I have to emphasize, people are too much driven by the policies of the month and 2 and 3. Somehow, I'm not in the horses business, but in the UK and elsewhere, they have what they call them blinkers or blinders. Now, those two things, they used to put them on the sides of the two horses. Now we have a policy blinkers, and they are putting it in the front of the policymaker, which is make sure that whatever you do can get you on a day-to-day basis or a month-to-month basis or a maybe 6 months basis. People are really not daring enough to see the bigger picture and the longer-term picture. If they gaze to that picture with all these convoluting things that are happening in the form of transitioning, in the form of actual existent elements of uncertainty driven by the fact there is no clarity on what would be the policies of the future, it actually makes it very apprehensive for an investor to invest. And even from the producer side, be it whatever it is, including, by the way, hydrogen. You know, people talk about hydrogen as the fuel of the future. I ask you, who is going to be the off-taker? And where is the price for hydrogen today? We go around, Saad, you go around, talking about blue, green, purple, pink hydrogen. But in the final analysis, who is going to be the off-taker? What would be the price of hydrogen? We're not talking oil. We're not talking gas. We're talking about the so-called cleanest of cleanest future, fuel of the future. And yet, you don't have the off-takers because, again, there are no clear policies for the off-taker to say, I have been given an incentive package that would enable me to buy that hydrogen, even green hydrogen, for that price for producers to produce it. If this is happening to hydrogen, and what we saw in Europe in terms of power last autumn, rescued by a gift of God that the winter was not as cold as was projected. How on earth one can envisage an energy future with all this uncertainty and, more important, with all these big questions that are not being answered?
But, Your Highness, I understand your frustration about the short term, and I understand that you maybe don't want to talk about what OPEC will do next, but we're in such a difficult economic environment, and you really have a front row seat in understanding what kind of economy we'll be left with. Why have we seen prices where they are?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that question, but I would have to backpedal if you allow me. Now, we were, as OPEC Plus, blamed in October, blamed in April. Who has the right numbers? Who gauged the situation in a much more, I would say, responsible way, but a tentative way? And what was our endeavor? Were we are price gougers or market stabilizers? I think over the last 6-7 months, we've proven to be a responsible regulatory institution. Had we had not had that, look at what happened to the other sources of energy in 22. What we need to do in the future, continue delivering in our authority. Because if you check what happened with all these so-called projections and forecasters, and I hope you can just give me a few seconds, look how who did the most in trying to bring forecasts and data and projections that really created most of the volatility that we've had in 22 and continue to do so. I mean, there is an organization called the IEA. I think they have, proven that it really takes a special talent to be consistently wrong, and that's exactly what they have done. Who put together that Russia production will decline 3 million? What happened? None of that happened. Policies were made in the form of SPR drawers as a result of that. Where was the use for it? Look at where we are now. Energy security is being shackled. We're running out of capacities because countries are not investing, both in oil and gas. We have a very funny trajectory of where demand would be. So if you are a hedger, as we are, we will have to take action to preempt any possibility of further volatility. And that's the challenge that but we are forthrightly accepting the challenge, and we will continue attending to the challenge.
Talking about volatility, I want to ask about short sellers, but we'll come to that in a second. Minister, how do you explain the price of oil down by 10%? Can you tell us whether you think Russia is compliant with some of their cuts, and what happens to prices going forward?
Regarding what?
Oil price.
Okay. يعني أنا حقيقة
Truly,
أريد أستثمر هذه
I would like to seize the opportunity. I would like to seize this opportunity in order to focus on a very important topic and a very important issue, the issue of energy in Iraq. We, as representatives of the government of Iraq, we are committed to supply the international market with the necessary energy based on our resources. And one of the indicators and one of our most important mission is to increase investment in gas, in the gas energy. This is the most important challenge for the time being. And there are so many promising projects for the time being in Iraq in order to put into place our vision. And this begins with the investment in the gas energy. As I said, in Iraq, we have two different types of gas. But for the time being, we are investing in the gas energy and a highest percentage. And we are producing 40% of our gas resources for the time being. But there are so many other challenges. We are committed to put into place so many projects, as I said. And one of the projects, we have a partnership with the Shell company pertaining in the production of gas in Al Basra, precisely. And there are two projects. We would like to increase the production of gas, reaching more than 400 million cubic meters. And the first phase of the project will be by the end of this month. And by the end of this year, we will put into place the second phase, as I said, of gas energy in different parts of Iraq. And this will help a lot. Added to that, we have signed an agreement with Total, the French company, and this pertains to the production of more than 600 million cubic meters of gas. And there are 5 oil fields that will be used within the next 5 years. All these projects that I have mentioned, and once again, I would like to seize the opportunity and my presence to say that we said that we are open to the international investment. This is, of course, the phase of the fifth phase of gas investment and oil investment is now open, and this pertains, of course, to the oil fields in Iraq and the one shared with Iran. So the objective from these projects is to increase the production of gas energy. Added to that, I have to say that there will be a sixth investment phase, and we will provide the investors with the details of this investment phase that pertains to the oil fields shared between us, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. We will give you the details within 1 month or 1 month and a half. And I would like to seize the opportunity to encourage the companies and the investors to come to Iraq and to take part in this project.
People in the room. Quickly, Minister, you have 500,000 barrels a day off the global market because of the northern fields that grow through Ceyhan in Turkey. When will that reopen?
What do you mean, sir?
So you have one of the ports that you're not exporting through Turkey. Will that reopen?
حق تركيا.
شلون؟
اللي عن طريق
تركيا
تركيا.
تركيا صادق.
فيما يخص الموضوع
As far as the export of oil from the north of Iraq, truly, there are some negotiations following the judgments of the Court of Paris, and Turkey was not permitted to export oil from the oil field that you mentioned, but thanks to the negotiations that we have embraced, thanks to the fruitful partnership with our colleagues from Turkey, and now we have been able
توقيع هذه العقود.
Now we are able to export the oil production, and we were able to sign these agreements recently. And we have signed 4 contracts allowing us to export oil from that part of Iraq, and we have informed our counterparts in Turkey that we are able to do so. And our colleagues from Turkey, they said that there are some evaluative issues that they have to take into account, and that resulted from the earthquake that hit Turkey. We are waiting for their response, but we are open to do so, and there will be an Iraqi delegation to be sent to Turkey in order to make sure that oil export can be possible from this oil field. As Said,
the biggest contracts with China. Will you have a lot more contracts with Asia this year, and will they be also very long-term for the North Field expansion?
Yes, we signed a large contract with China. We have other deals that we are working on. We potentially, with so many deals, we're just lining up people to negotiate with because we're just so busy. And there is a potential that we will run out of all the gas from the NFE and NFS by the end of the year as far as long-term contracts. That's how busy we are. There is very big demand.
Yeah, longer term, how do you see the energy complex changing?
The
energy complex for the world changing?
You know, you need a mix of all energy sources, and people need to realize that you need this mix. You need oil, you need gas, you need renewables. People talk about renewables as if it's the fix-all. If you look at renewables, you can generate electricity from wind and solar, but you can't manufacture plastics and things that you have in this room that are all manufactured. Makeup for women, creams. There are a lot of things that go, you have oil and gas products that go into it from refining and so on. So you can't do away with it. Panels in your cars and so on. So renewables, as far as just saying generating electricity, does not solve the problem. You need a proper energy mix, and it can't be driven by just politics and politicians want to get into a seat to say this is the solution. It sells, it's a nice pitch to say energy transition, but when you dig down and look at the reality, it's not achievable. And I think the signal from the G7 today attests to that.
So you see that changing?
I think it's already changing, and people are realizing that reality is kicking in, and you actually need. The only thing that saved, I think, humanity and Europe this year was a warm winter, and the slowdown in the economy worldwide. If the economy starts churning back up in 24, and you have just a regular winter, I think the worst is yet to come. If they don't realize that and have a proper plan and sit down with producers and oil and gas companies and not demonize them, reality will kick in, and I think we'll have a sensible solution. But you need a mix of all.
We're almost out of time, but Your Highness, do you worry about short sellers or anything in the market that worries you?
Well, I was asked once, are you worrying? I don't worry. I think. I do myself. I save my neck by not worrying, and I focus on thinking. So I don't worry. I think speculators, like anything in any market, they are there to stay. I keep advising them that they will be ouching. They did ouch in April. I don't have to show my cards. I'm not a poker player, and I don't know how to play poker, but I got it from a movie somewhere. But I would just tell them, watch out.
All right. Thank you so much for a very informative panel.
Thank you. يا الله.
Thank you.
Okay, منا.
Please welcome to the stage.
سيدتي سادتي، دعونا نرحب الآن بالسيدة هازليندا أمين.
Hello there. I'd like to thank all the leaders this morning for their valuable insights into some of the most pressing challenges in the world. We'd like to thank our official partners, Ministry of Commerce and Industry and Media City Qatar, our presenting sponsors, Qatar Investment Authority, QNB and QRDI Council, and our participating sponsor, QInvest. We'd like to express gratitude to His Highness, the Emir of the State of Qatar. Thank you, Your Highness. And now this session has ended. Forum guests, please do remain in your seats. All right, we'll now take a break. Join us back here at 11:30 a.m. for a conversation with Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Haslinda Amin, host and editor-at-large of the Qatar Economic Forum, powered by Bloomberg.
Thank you. Welcome back. I hope you had some coffee. Well, a major shift in the existing global economic order is emerging. In a world defined by resource battles, assertive economic stagecraft, and demand for resilient and geopolitically neutral trade partners, the economic nexus between the Gulf, India, and Southeast Asia is rising in importance. Can this regional power nexus drive global growth into the next decade? Well, the Qatar Economic Forum, powered by Bloomberg, will shine a light on this rising south-to-south economy and the new growth opportunities it presents to the business community. But before that, just a few announcements. The Wi-Fi network is Qatar Economic Forum. Not surprising, the password is Bloomberg. We encourage you to download the Forum app. Instructions on how to download can be found by following the event website QR code. You can find that on your badge. You can use the app to network, to schedule meetings with other delegates. And if you want to engage with other attendees, please be sure to go to the privacy mode, ensure that your profile is visible. We also would love to hear from you, to ask one of our speakers any questions, respond to any of our live audience polls. Please scan the polling and Q&A code. You can find that at the back of your badge as well, so that badge is very important. You can engage with us on social media. We'd love for you to do that. The hashtag Qatar Economic Forum. And now, on with our program. Please join me in welcoming to the stage His Excellency Viktor Orbán, Prime Minister of Hungary, for a conversation with Bloomberg's editor-in-chief, John Micklethwaite.
Viktor Orbán, Prime Minister of Hungary and Europe's longest-serving Premier. We just talked, you have done 17 years. Thank you for talking to us. I know that you have just signed a deal with Qatar, and we're going to come back to that. But can we begin with the other reason why your country is in the news, Ukraine? The basic issue with Ukraine, it's a sovereign country that was invaded by Russia. Just as you might say, Hungary was invaded by the Soviet Union back in 1956. I just watched a video last night. Your great heroes were people like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan and John Paul II, who supported Hungary during that. Yesterday, your foreign minister said you would block the aid that the European Union wants to give to Ukraine at this particular time. And I wonder how you, a country that is, you have been invaded by Russia, you know what that is like, why you do that.
First of all, thank you very much for the possibility to have that conversation. One small additional remark. 17 years in power and 16 years in opposition. That's equally important. Anyway, on the war issue, you should know that, that Hungary has a very unique situation in this whole war because Ukraine is not a country far away. Ukraine is our neighbor. Second, we have minorities, ethnic minorities living in Ukraine, 200,000 something. Yes. And they are part of the war. They are conscripted as soldiers to the Ukrainian army, and they die. So we lose lives daily, Hungarian lives as well. So therefore, we consider this whole situation from a special angle. So we do not belong to the mainstream European approach. And my position was, or the position of Hungary was, the very first moment, that this war is the failure of diplomacy. It should have never happened, that war, outbreak. So looking what's going on the front line, for us, it's obvious that the battlefield solution does not work. So whoever right and whoever not. You rightly described the situation that Russia invaded Ukraine, but the question is not who invaded whom. The question is what will be the next morning. The next morning, the fact is that more and more people will die, and there is no chance to have a victory on neither side. So this is a war which just deprives many persons from lives without having results.
But surely you can't, we can all agree that the diplomacy before Ukraine was not successful, but there is a very big difference between the failure on that and the mere fact of invasion. And what intrigues me is you, as someone, it was one of the great reasons you came into politics. You made a great deal about
I'm a freedom
1956
fighter, yeah.
and fighting for freedom. You have a neighbor who is invaded by Russia, the very country, you grew up with pictures of tanks going into Budapest. Why are you opposing the European aid?
No, it's emotionally, it's tragic. So all of our heart is with the Ukrainians. We understand how much they suffer, but I'm speaking here as a politician who should save lives. So the most important thing for the international political community is to save lives, especially when you are convinced, as I do, that there is no chance to win this war. So therefore, what we should do far more energy invest into to convince everybody that the only solution is ceasefire. And then after the ceasefire, peace talks should start. And then we could back to your point, yeah?
But do you really think there is no chance of Ukraine winning?
That's my
point. They stand very little chance of winning without the aid which you are currently blocking.
No, my position is that looking at the reality, looking at the figures, looking at the surroundings, looking at the fact that NATO is not ready to send troops, it's obvious that there is no victory for poor Ukrainians on the battlefield. That's my position. That was always my suggestion to everybody, that instead of to manage to have a stronger involvement into the war, escalation should be stopped, and we should argue in favor of peace and negotiations.
It's interesting you say that.
Don't forget the facts. Russia is 140 million people, Ukraine is 30.
It's interesting you say that, though, because my understanding is your foreign minister has not launched it under the reason that Ukraine cannot win, but that it's a kind of question to do with whether one of the banks is delineated as being the Ukrainians are treating them badly, which seems rather petty compared with this big issue.
No, it's not. It's a question of principle. So the foreign minister was right. So if, as a country like Ukraine, would like to get your financial support, which is inevitable for them, they can't put your companies on the blacklist. It's impossible to run at the same time. So if you need our money, please respect us and don't sanction our companies. That's so simple.
You talked about NATO. I was intrigued in terms of where you see. Imagine there is a ceasefire. Imagine there is a beginning of a peace with Russia. You may have seen Henry Kissinger, someone who was previously rather skeptical about the idea of Ukraine as part of NATO, now thinks the idea of Ukraine as a buffer state, as something that sits in between the West and the East, has gone, and that therefore, as part of a peace settlement, Ukraine should come into NATO. Where do you stand on that?
So that's an interesting speculation. It's good for intellectuals, by the way. But I'm a decision maker. So we should concentrate on, as doer, what should be done. And my point is that first we should have ceasefire. And then when we have the ceasefire, let's start about the new security architecture of the European continent. My point is that the only peace talk and peace agreements could close this whole conflict if it is between Russia and the United States. So what is at the stake? Of course, Ukraine is very important, but in longer term, strategically thinking, what is at the stake is the future security of Europe. And it's obvious that without United States, there is no security architecture for Europe. And now the war cannot be stopped only if the Russians can make an agreement with the United States. As a European, I'm not happy with that anyway, but this is the only way out.
One other thing on NATO, you also have objected to Sweden, or you seem to be least keen on Sweden becoming part of NATO. I know that you might well say that's members of the parliament, but you are, as we established, a very successful politician. Why object to Sweden coming into NATO?
Because the political relation between Sweden and Hungary is awfully wrong, and we have to improve first. We would not like to import conflicts into NATO first. So first, manage the disagreements between the two countries, and then we are ready to support them. On the principal basis, we are in favor of that anyway, and we like the Swedish guy, but I mean the Swedish people, but the political relation between the countries is rather nasty at this moment.
Can we look at the European Union? The EU is currently refusing or delaying handing over, I think it's $30 billion worth of grants and loans to Hungary. You have protested about this, but I wonder, have you set a deadline for when the Europeans should give you what you see as your money?
No, but we should understand the character of the disagreement. It's not about the money. Okay. Money is important, but you know, Europe is strong, Hungary is strong, so we can manage our economies even without our own, based on our own resources. But we have to understand that there are two basic strategical issues we have disagreement with the mainstream of the European Union. The first is the discussion on de-risking or decoupling on one side and connectivity on the other side. And more European countries on the side of the de-risking or decoupling, and Hungary is strongly in favor of connection and connectivity. The other strategical difference is on war, because there is a war psyche in Europe. The mainstream and the majority think that they can win the war and there is a battlefield solution. Hungary disagree with that. So these are the main two strategical differences. And the whole involvement of financial issue and financing questions, just the consequence of the two strategically different approaches.
It just struck me, those are very big differences. You look back also at all your other difficulties with the European Union. From somebody who comes from Britain, it does feel a bit like the run-up to Brexit. Many of your heroes, Roger Scruton, we were talking about it earlier, your favorite teacher, backed Brexit. You feel like an inherent Brexiteer. Why does Hungary remain in the European Union, given your differences?
No, it's very simple. The answer, 85% of our export is going to European Union market. We are not as strong and powerful and mighty as the British are in terms of security and financial help. You know, the situation
is foolish, you know.
Probably, but now it's not the program anyway. You know, in the European Union we have one basic difficulty, and this is the question of leadership. In the European Union, there is a very much intellectual approach to the question of leadership. And they think that leadership means that we are led by institutions, and the job of the politicians to operate properly the institutions, which is a nice idea anyway, when everything is going well. But when there are difficulties, it does not work. Institutions are not helpful. We need leaders, human beings, who make decisions, take the responsibility, and so on and so on. So now we are living in difficult times, and European Union does not have that kind of leadership.
The British leaders spent years complaining about the bureaucracy of Brussels, the blob, as some people called it. Surely you're in the same position as that.
Yeah, the bubble is awful, yeah, in Brussels, in fact. So it's the whole life of European Union is over-bureaucratized and over-centralized, no question of that.
You mentioned decoupling, and I've seen you've done a number of deals with China, and I'm going to try and generalize for the audience. You know, you have tried to take slightly the same attitude with China as you have done with Russia, that rather than being part of the Western side, you want to be one of the leaders of the rest. You want to be one of the people who is trying to link China and the West.
No,
is that a reasonable way to look at it?
No, we don't have that ambition. The reason is that connectivity is a good thing. We have 10 million people. The export is 80–85% of our GDP, so we are a very open country. And we need commercial and trade and political connections. So we believe connectivity. So China is a huge opportunity. Why we should miss it?
I suppose many people would argue because China could be the long-term opponent of the West.
Or partner.
Or partner.
It's our decision.
That may be, very quickly, that may be an area on which you disagree with Donald Trump, for instance.
Probably. Let's wait him come back and discuss it.
We'll come back to American politics at the end. I wonder if the applause is for the idea of Donald Trump coming back or for the idea of him not coming back.
Understandably.
Yesterday, to come to what you're doing here, you signed an energy deal with Qatar for the purchase of gas, and you said it's always better to stand on several legs than just one leg, which was presumably a reference to Hungary's reliance on Russia for gas. Can you give us any idea about what will come as part of that deal? How much gas will you get from Qatar?
The negotiations are still going on, first of all. Second, Hungary is a landlocked country, which means that we cannot neglect the energy coming from Russia by pipelines. So half of the Hungarian needs of energy are coming from Russia, long-term contracts, and the other half we have to find other partners. So we are looking for partners all around the world, and Qatar is a potential partner for us. But you know, everybody's queuing at the door of the Qataris, so it's not easy to get there and to sign a deal. But even if we are able to do so, it could start not earlier than 26, because till then the Qataris are fully occupied by. So we hope that we can cooperate. Qatar is a country which we respect very much. Without them, Europe would have been in trouble last year. And we try to build up a more strategic cooperation with them, not just energy, but at the same time agriculture, IT, and basically some security issues as well.
Do you think you will get, there's talk in Budapest that some people think you'll get the Qataris to help you buy back the airport in Budapest, which you have been looking at?
Yeah, Hungary, the main value of Hungary from your point of view probably is the geographical position, because we are in the middle of Europe, in the middle of Central Europe, and all the roads are running through Hungary from north to south and east-west. Airport has a strategic importance for us. Qataris are interested in. There is no decision yet. We are still negotiating. We would be happy to welcome them. They are still there in Hungary as investors.
So you would like to get Qatari money to help you buy back as an investor.
Yeah. But we are ready to be involved as well. So strategical investments, what we need in Budapest in the airport. It's not just to buy out, but to have a big scheme to develop it as one of the competitive airports in the European market.
Your critics would say that on getting rid of that tie with Russia to do with energy, you have been perhaps slower than others. You've done deals with Gazprom and things like this. Just as an example, you still have Russia's state nuclear company, Rosatom, building your nuclear power plant. By any measure, it's not going particularly well, partly because of sanctions and so on and delays. Surely that is a place where you could just drop the Russian company and get a move on.
Well, you know, so we are not in hurry in that respect. In Hungary, back to 60 years, we have a Russian technology-based nuclear power station, which is functioning very well, and the Russians were always reliable partners. And we would like to enlarge that nuclear power station. And to enlarge based on a different technology, it's very risky. So if we would like to enlarge on the same site, we have to use the Russian technology. So we continue to do so, and I hope we will be able to continue. You know, it's a complicated process to build a nuclear power station. There are some delay, but I'm optimistic that we can conclude it as it was planned.
You may not agree with them, but can you at least understand why other European countries, when they look at you and they see this you're still hanging on to the Russians with your nuclear power plant, you still have the deals with Gazprom, you are still the person who is talking about Ukraine not winning and then just being a peace, can you see why people think of you as being too much on the side of Vladimir Putin?
For obvious reasons, but you know, now in Europe, if you stand on your national interest basis, you can be accused easily that you are in favor of Russia. But the fact is that my compass is always shows to the direction of the Hungarian national interest. I'm not dealing with any other leader. I'm dealing with my own country. I stand for Hungary, you know. So whatever accusation I can get, or I will continue to have it. And you are right that Hungary is a country which thinks that if you do something 10 times, like introducing sanction packages, and it's failed, it's not reasonable to do it 11 times, you know, do it again, hoping that the outcome will be different. This is against the common sense. So the sanction policy of European Union, in our understanding, simply does not work.
But isn't that the whole point? When you talk about just being about national interest, isn't that the whole point of being part of a treaty alliance? The whole point of being something like the European Union is that, yes, you take into account your national interest, but in the end, you support your neighbors, you support the wider, bigger goal. In this one case to push back Russia, another case to further the European Union.
No, it's two separable issues. First is, of course, we have to make an agreement with the Russians about the future of European security. That's one thing. The other issue is what is the future of European Union? And there are two schools in this respect in Brussels. First, it's United States of Europe, or as it is said by Brazilian language, ever closer union. We don't like it. We would not like to belong to an empire. We would like to maintain our national sovereignty. So the other concept is, that the second school is, to maintain the national sovereignty and imagine Europe as an alliance, a cooperation scheme of sovereign states. We belong to the second school. This is a big difference now and discussion inside the European Union. But you know, the only way to go forward to discuss it.
In terms of friends, you obviously have the Qataris here. In terms of the Arab world generally, in some ways, many people, you know, some people are quite surprised you are here. You are someone who has taken, I'll be polite about it, a very robust attitude towards Muslims in Hungary. You have talked about Hungary being a Christian country. You don't want to have Islamic civilization invading Europe. So why are you here trying to get money from them?
So no, it's not about money. What we are here is more political than economic anyway. But I think the main dilemma of the future is not whether it's Muslim or Christian. The main dilemmas for the future, like migration, gender propaganda, and the sovereignty of the state, you know, it's normality or abnormality, as we say. And Christians and Muslims can cooperate to defend and preserve traditional values. God, nation, family, this is the most important thing. It's not Christian or Muslim. So that's the reason why we can cooperate even on basis of principle with Muslim countries. Erdogan, who I'm very much in favor of him, is a good friend of Hungary, good friend of the Hungarian government. Even we have a very clear-cut Christian identity of our government. So the religion is not a difficulty in cooperation between these countries.
Your position is you're happy to meet Muslims here, you just don't want them coming to Hungary.
No, that's about migration. So migration is a different issue. So the question is, who decide about who can enter into your country and who can stay there, and you have to live with whom? Who is the main authority to decide it? The national state or somebody else? And Hungary insists on that to make decision about who can come into our country and who we live with, it's our exclusive decision. It cannot be decision of Brussels or somebody else. So that's the question of migration. It's not a cultural issue, that's another dimension, which does not belong to Hungary because Hungary has a clear-cut, non-endangered Christian identity. So we are strong enough in our identity.
I wondered in terms of we talked earlier about Donald Trump's name came up. You've generally been more friendly with him, if I can put it that way, than other European leaders. Do you think that he will win the next election?
I hope so.
But DeSantis, who you were also somewhat close to, well, there seemed to be something of a friendly relationship building.
Yeah. He's also a very good leader, but, you know, I belong to the club of the veterans, and the veterans support each other, you know.
A veteran who's very much to the fore. Certainly no one could describe Joe Biden as young.
No.
What is wrong with Joe Biden?
No, it's not my job to criticize the head of the United States, you know. It's not a good business idea anyway.
But you would rather there was a different. You would rather there was a different leader of the United States.
I would rather say that you know, the American Democrats are far more ideologically led than the Republicans, and the Democrats always like to convince you and sometimes force you how to live, you know, and I don't like it, you know. We have our own culture. The culture defines how we live. Don't interfere, please. Don't educate us. Don't say what is good, what is bad, what is liberal. You know, we don't like that. It's not your job. It's not the job of the Americans and any other nation. It's the Hungarian job. That's so simple.
But there is
Donald Trump understands it. That's important.
But there is one very big difference, is that Donald Trump sees issues like China, particularly, in very black and white terms. You know, he is the person who launched this, not the first person, but he's the person who certainly accelerated America's decoupling from China.
Yeah.
It is hard to imagine him not pushing that further. Isn't that the main area where you come into automatic conflict with the people on the right who otherwise you support?
I can't call it conflict, but we have to be very calmly state that the interest of United States and interest of European Union and the European countries in relation to China are definitely different. So this is the starting point. So to harmonize our policy or to cooperate on this subject requires negotiations between the United States and the European Union. And even if the President of the United States will and would be Trump, we have to negotiate on that seriously. It's a complicated, difficult subject, but I think Europe should stand on its own interest in relation to China.
And do you see any sign of a change in the European leadership towards people who would be more sympathetic to your point of view? At the moment, you are somewhat short of immediate allies in Europe, if I can put it that way, inside the European Union.
Time can help.
What about in terms
of
time?
Not so many now, but time can help.
In terms of time, yourself, you have served as your country's leader for a very long time. Do you have some internal date when you might move on?
It will decide my wife. You know, so it's
it's a democratic vote.
The democratic vote at home. You know, that's the reason why basically we are here. You know, because I was first time elected as prime minister in '98. So I started to cooperate with the Qatari government anyway in '99, when the first time the Qatari foreign minister visited Hungary. So our relation to Qatar, okay, economy is important, but it's not exclusively economic. Money is important, but investment is important. But our cooperation is more political than economic one. Going back, you know, personal relationship counts, personal loyalty counts, leadership relationship counts. So that's the reason why we have that kind of privileged relationship between Qatar and Hungary back to 1990 when I met the Father Emir and that time foreign minister.
The video I saw of you, you also talked about going to see Margaret Thatcher then, as going to see in those times. And I wonder, I just put it to you again, you know, the Viktor Orban who first emerged, you know, for whom the Russians invading Hungary was a changing point. Obviously, you know, you only heard about it, but you stood up for you thought that Hungary had been betrayed by people during that?
No, I was the first leader in Central Europe who publicly requested the withdrawal of the Soviet troops from the Central European countries. It's true.
But that Viktor Orban, you know, who emerged somebody who many people on the right, many people throughout Europe saw as a natural partner, somebody who could be part of that bigger, wider picture that you have garnered. The new Viktor Orban is a very different creature.
No, but you are speaking on Ukrainian war again, yeah?
Yes.
Save Ukraine as much as we can. And the only good thing what we can do for the Ukrainian people to have ceasefire and peace and save lives. That's Viktor Orban's position.
Has your overall political philosophy changed?
No, it's not about philosophy, it's about the war and losing human lives daily. Stop it.
Viktor Orban, thank you very much for talking to us and talking to the Qatar Economic Forum. Prime Minister Orban, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage His Excellency Khalid Al Falih, Minister of Investment for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the Right Honorable Kemi Badenoch, Secretary of State for Business and Trade for the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Stephanie Flanders.
Well, thank you for being here, for listening to this conversation about re-engineering globalization. The world is changing. What was cheap is now expensive. Food, energy, the price of money have all gone up relative to that first era of globalization that most of us have lived through since the early 90s. And with that has come an overturning of a lot of the assumptions that that era was based on. Maybe it's not deglobalization. Maybe it's not even decoupling, though we will probably talk about that. But it's certainly a rethink, a reorientation of the global economy, which is going to produce winners and losers. So I want to talk about all of that today with our two distinguished ministers. Your Excellency, Minister, in this new world, do all roads lead to the Gulf? Do all roads lead to the Gulf?
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here. Let me greet and thank our hosts, State of Qatar, and congratulate them on great achievements that have been taking place here. Over many decades, really, I've been a friend of Qatar. I've been visiting Qatar, and every time you come, you see an amazing new development. Last year, of course, was the apex of that when Qatar set a new standard, which I think leads to answering your question, on hosting a global event of the scale of the World Cup. And it was not only the infrastructure, the facilities, but also the quality with which it was organized. And we're seeing it again today with convening global leaders here and government policy and business to talk about issues as important as energy, which we heard earlier, and now on globalization and global supply chain. Indeed, as you said, Stephanie, the world is very turbulent, and we've seen serious fissures in the global world order that we've known over many decades, concerning to many of us. Part of it is geopolitical security, as we see the war in Europe, and of course, global supply chains, which have been disrupted with serious challenges to flows of trade, flows of investment, flows of capital. And I worry that more to come with nationalism, protectionism, and some restrictions to trade, and walking away from a system that has been good to the global community. As you go to Riyadh, as you go to Qatar, as you go, we heard about Rwanda today. Developing countries have benefited immensely from the global order that has been created over the last 3-4 decades, brought billions of people out of poverty into the middle class. I like to think that this region, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and our GCC colleagues, Iraq, who were here earlier, have contributed to this global well-being and this development through supply of energy over many decades. Going back to your question, when you look at the world today, where is a region that looks bright in the midst of this turbulence? Political stability, economic stability, currency stability, energy stability in terms of availability, not only of fossil fuels, but increasingly renewables, setting the stage, as His Royal Highness said, Prince Abdulaziz, with available of abundance of new energies of the future to fuel regions that are in dire need for energy supply. So indeed, the region is growing faster than the global average by a significant margin. There is a significant creation of capital in the region. Saudi Arabia last year registered 31% growth in capital formation in the economy of Saudi Arabia. Our GDP growth was significantly higher than the average G20. We were the fastest growing in the G20, but I think significantly the non-oil economy in Saudi Arabia grew by 5.5%. So far this year, despite declining oil prices and declining production, our non-oil GDP is growing at the same pace. So we're seeing a decoupling between the oil economy of Saudi Arabia and the non-oil economy of Saudi Arabia. And I'm sure it is replicated here in the GCC, which together constitute a significant market and a significant stabilizer for the global economy.
Just one follow-up to you, Excellency, if I may. You have said you wanted Riyadh to be the economic and political capital of the Middle East. I think for many outside the region, big businesses looking at the region, they would not obviously now point to Riyadh, and they would see a lot of competition for that crown, particularly Dubai, which has built up such a network of global companies. So how do you confront that, people that you're not the first choice or maybe even the second choice for inward investment?
Well, I think the fact that I want, Saudi Arabia is obviously the political capital of the Middle East. We are the convener of leaders from the region and abroad. We saw it during the visits of President Trump, President Biden, President Xi Jinping a few months ago, just convened one of the most successful Arab summits in history, resolving many issues within the Arab world, including a ceasefire in Sudan. Within the GCC, we see ourselves as a common market. You've set the stage, I think, for the world to see in Europe with the common market in the EU evolving over time. And within the EU, there is a healthy competition between capitals. When I was in the private sector, different capitals, different states within the EU were vying for our investment and our trade and our relationship. So I think if there is competition between certain capitals within the GCC, I think it's for the good of all of the GCC. And indeed, it contributes to the good of the world. But the combination of size, vision, and quality does matter. And Riyadh has all of the above plus a lot more. We have a vision that is into the decades, not a short-term vision, not a mid-term vision. We have economies of scale in a city that is approaching 8 million and growing at the fastest city. 50% of the Saudi GDP alone, which is about 50% of the GCC economy, with a huge developmental plan. Quality of life is transforming in Saudi Arabia in general, and in Riyadh in particular, at a pace we've never seen in our lives. So that trajectory is going to be good for the entire region. I think Qatar, Dubai, Kuwait, Bahrain, when I talk to leaders there, political leaders, business leaders, citizens, they're excited about the transformation, Vision 2030, what is happening in Saudi Arabia and what we're doing across the country for the Arab region as a whole, but specifically, I think it's going to be very beneficial for the integrated GCC economies.
Secretary of State, the UK is clearly in a different position. I guess, I mean, you and I are both from the UK. I think many on the outside, if they think of the Gulf and Asia as the future, it's very easy and is common to look at the UK as the past and a country that is pushing itself perhaps further behind from the decision to leave the EU. How do you confront that view?
And just before I answer the question, Stephanie, I think I must first of all thank the Qatar Economic Forum and all of the people who have hosted me on my first visit to Qatar. You're talking about the UK in a sense of us being the past. That's absolutely not the way we see it. We have had a long-standing cooperation with the countries of the GCC. I'm sure His Excellency would agree with me. And I just wanted to thank everyone for the very warm welcome which I've had on my first visit to the region. There's so much that I'm seeing and that I'm learning. And I'm very privileged to be here. And also, just post the World Cup, thanking you for hosting such a fantastic event. You turned my son into a football fan. He was 6 years old, didn't know any football, and now that's all that he's obsessed about. So I think that's a testament to the influence that this country and this region is having all across the world. But that doesn't mean that other countries are the past. We are evolving. The world is changing, and I think it would have been wrong for anyone to assume that the way the world was in 1880 or 1980 is the same way it's going to look for the future. What we're doing in the UK is making sure that we're able to adapt to the changing circumstances. And that's why we had our integrated review. We have a strategy to tilt towards the Indo-Pacific and the Gulf, the rest of the world, not just the EU. We still have a very strong relationship with the EU. You and I were talking earlier about the free trade agreement that we have there. But we are a trading nation, and we want to trade with the rest of the world. That's why I'm here, making sure that we successfully negotiate our GCC free trade agreement, but also making sure that people can see that the UK is open for business. We're still one of the top investment destinations. People see us as a stable place. We have an environment where the rule of law applies. People know where they stand. We have really wonderful skills. We're placed in the perfect place in terms of time zones. And we're welcoming to the world. The very fact that I'm sitting here, people will know that my ancestry is not British, and yet I'm sitting here as a Secretary of State. It shows that it's a place where people can come to and achieve whatever it is that they can fulfill their potential. And I think that's the story about the UK that we want to tell to the rest of the world.
But if, going back to how I started this session, if you look at the tectonic shifts going on in the global economy, one of them is in favor of regionalism in trade over globalism. Another is the rise of renewables, and looking to a future for renewables and indeed electric car production. In many of these areas, the feeling is the UK is now going to be caught between the US and the EU. The former Bank of England chief economist has talked of a global arms race to reindustrialize, which we're at risk of falling behind in. How do you confront those realities? We can never put the same kind of money into this as the US or the EU.
Well, everyone is at risk. So I think one of the things we mustn't do is create a story around UK exceptionalism. The EU is not a country. The US is. The countries within the EU are all concerned about what is going on in terms of the response to the US's Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, as we refer to it in the UK. They don't necessarily know whether they will benefit even if the EU has its own program, because it's about member countries. So I have spoken to my counterparts in other EU countries, and they worry, will France get all the benefits? Will it be Germany? And even within the US, there's a lot of intrastate competition. So the story about the EU doing one thing and the US doing another, and the UK being caught in the middle, I think is first of all, overly simplistic and not quite true. There is a lot that is going on around the world. You look at some of the things that are happening at the WTO with the dispute settlement mechanism issue, the appellate body. Everybody is worried about fragmentation. This is not something that specifically applies to the UK. What we can do is have our own response that is specific to our economy. No, we can't spend 400 or 500 billion like the US does, but we shouldn't have to. We don't have the same population. We don't have the same needs. What we need to do is look at what we do best. Where is our comparative advantage? What should we be investing in? And that is where the work that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have done in terms of identifying those 5 sectors where we want to specialize in. We don't call it an industrial strategy, but if you look at the announcements we've made, where we've put the money, which industries we have been supporting when they've run into trouble, I think it's quite clear the picture that we are painting about what the UK is about.
Your Excellency, one of the things that we will talk about is de-risking, and for some that is a byword for decoupling from China. But I see that there is an Arab-China Business Forum next month. How do you see Saudi's relationship with Chinese business and how going forward? And where does that fit in with other countries trying to move away from China?
Well, for us in the region, and certainly for us in Saudi Arabia, and I can speak for the kingdom, we don't see our relationship with China any differently than we've seen our relationship with Japan, Korea, and the rest of developing Asia over the last few decades, as I mentioned, as this shift in the global economy happens and evolves over time as billions of people come out of poverty and create centers of demand and increasingly centers of production, centers of innovation, and centers of capital and finance. And again, China is a continuation of a trend that started in the 1950s and 60s, and the region has been adapting to it appropriately, providing energy to developing Asia, and in turn importing a lot of our manufactured developed goods. So China today, our trade with China is equivalent to the total trade with the US and the EU. They are by far the largest importer from the kingdom, not only oil and LPG and other oil petroleum products, but manufactured goods, including chemicals, rubbers, plastics, and elastomers. So we are tied with China in many ways. We're a big investor in China. China is increasingly looking at the kingdom as an investment platform as it evolves in its own development plan. In the meantime, we're committed to our relationship with Western countries. The US remains to be our biggest partner in terms of capital flows. We're a big investor in the US, and we'll continue to do that. And we import also a lot of highly advanced, and we believe the US will continue to lead in innovation, technology development, and the financial markets in the US will continue to be dominant. So there is no decoupling in any sense between Saudi Arabia, but we play where our interests are without in any way compromising on our principles and values. And that has served us well over the years, following our interest and creating relationships that are not tactical, not short-term, but long-term strategic. And that is the case with our partners from the US, Europe, UK, of course, as the Secretary of State said in her opening remarks, and with Asian countries, including China.
And Secretary of State, we have, over the years, recently, Britain has been a bit more wary of Chinese inward investment in certain key industries and technologies. Mm-hmm. I think it would be useful to know where we currently stand on that. Where are we comfortable having Chinese inward investment, and where do we think we now have to be more concerned and more careful?
I think our strategy is not entirely about China. The relationship that we have with China is a pragmatic one. As with every other country in the world, we work well where we can, but also quite often we are in competition. The world that came out of the pandemic was one where we saw that economic resilience, economic security, you look at things like supply chains, they suddenly became more of a concern generally, just because of what happened when there was an over-reliance on one country. It is very risky for everybody to be reliant on one country. China is obviously, it's the biggest exporter in the world. We all have relationships with it, but we mustn't be in a situation where if something goes wrong with China or in China, as we saw during the pandemic, that the whole world grinds to a halt. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of how we are deciding where to protect and where economic security is more of an issue. But what I will say is that we want to have a good investment relationship with countries like China, but that's not going to be at the expense of our economic security.
Just to follow up a bit, because when you were talking earlier, you said, Britain doesn't have to do everything. We pick our comparative advantage, which feels to me as an economist as the way we used to think about globalization. But the way that you've just talked about it is more the way we talk about it now, that you don't want to be reliant on the one country that has got the comparative advantage. You actually have to make the stuff yourself. So that's why you won't...
No, actually, there's quite a lot in between those two positions. So diversification, diversifying where you get resources from. Some people will use phrases like friendshoring or nearshoring, however you want to describe it. You may call some of that a little bit more regionalism. But everybody needs to make sure that they're able to look after the people in their country and do their best in that. That's why we are doing the jobs that we're doing. It's not about trying to stick to a particular economic theory. It is looking at the world situation, what is working, what isn't. And what we saw was that the breakdown in supply chains meant that we were too reliant on one particular way. So let's diversify. And it also means helping other countries that are in difficulty grow, do well. That means having more economic partnerships, whether it's more free trade agreements, more ways of cooperating, because a world that has economic growth globally is one that is good for the UK. We don't believe in a zero-sum game. If everybody else around us is getting poorer, we will get poorer. If everyone else around us is getting richer, we know that we will get richer, and that's really what we're working towards.
Excellency, you've launched your supply chain resilience initiative. This is a very important area for many countries, looking at their vulnerabilities. How are you envisaging? Are you bringing companies in to improve resilience? How are you thinking about making supply chains more resilient?
So just following on what the Secretary of State said, diversification globally is very important. And also coupling this with net zero commitments that almost every country has declared. So we need to lighten the carbon and the greenhouse gas emission footprint of global supply chain, global manufacturing, and introduce cleaner and greener fuels over the next couple of 2-3 decades. And we believe the Kingdom ticks all the boxes when it comes to meeting the criteria that Her Excellency talked to. Location is close to many of the demand centers, existing demand centers and emerging demand centers in Africa and Europe. Stability of the economy, multiple ports for exports, both in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea, pegged currency. As I mentioned, energy will constitute renewables will constitute 50% of our electrification. We're introducing already 3 OEMs that will be making electric vehicles in the Kingdom, mostly for exports, not just for our own consumption. Accessing materials within the Kingdom where we have significant mineral resources, but also closeness to Africa, closeness to mineral resources in Asia, bringing it to the Kingdom where we can do value add, and then maybe as intermediate products, advanced materials that can go into final assemblies into the UK, into Europe, into the US, into developed countries in Asia. That's what our program that you mentioned, GISRI, the Global Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, is all about. Of course, it's coupled with our investment capability. The Kingdom is an investment powerhouse, as mentioned in our Vision 2030. So we have Saudi companies that can invest on their own or co-invest. We're one of the biggest fertilizer, petrochemical, aluminum manufacturers already. Of course, we're known for oil and gas already. So, but we will joint venture. We will work together with international investors. We'll bring in international capital. We've announced multiple special economic zones that will give all of the regulatory needs for international, multinational companies to choose the kingdom as a platform.
Just specifically on that, I just wondered, do you expect that most of the big deals will be co-anchored by a state entity, like Aramco or PIF, as we've seen with some other deals?
That happens to be the pattern now, but it's not a precondition. I think international companies prefer a strong local investor of the highest reputation, and we have many.
Would you prefer not? Would you prefer to have them come without that?
As a Minister of Investment, we treat investors the same, but we allow them to joint venture when they want to, when it's good for both of them. But the state and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with very, very few exceptions, hardly none, leaves it open for international investors to come and choose the kingdom as their home and operate unhindered by any regulatory constraints. And certainly, there is no requirement that they have a local partner unless they find it to be value-adding and beneficial to them.
And Secretary of State, I'll leave the last word with you. I mean, when you think of the sectors that you want to prioritize, the car industry in the UK has been our biggest export for some time, but the car exporting and production has fallen dramatically since the Brexit referendum for a lot of reasons. How will you ensure the future of the UK car industry? Because I think people look at that as a sign for many other sectors as well.
I think that's absolutely right, and it's an excellent question, because what I've been talking about, comparative advantage, making sure that we look after supply chains, really impacts the car industry, probably more than most. What I would say to all the people who work in that industry and to that sector generally is that we are doing everything we can to look after you. We want people to continue to invest in the UK. We think that we have a lot of strength there. So I'm working on a plan, an advanced manufacturing plan, so to speak, which should be a way of helping to corral a little bit more in terms of not just support, but more streamlined policy about what we're going to do in order to make sure that this industry survives. It's critical for our transition to net zero. It's also critical to the UK government's levelling up agenda. It's very, very important for things like R&D, science. People often just think of the car industry as a manufacturing one, but actually there's a lot of research and development that is being done that is really essential for our productivity, for our economic growth. So we're working on it. We are also looking at what else is going on in the world, but I think that when we do come out with our plan, the sector will be very pleased.
And is that going to be before the autumn, or is it waiting on the Chancellor's tax subsidies, or what?
All I will say, Stephanie, is wait and see.
And how much is the deal with is a negotiation with the EU part of that plan, or crucial to that plan?
It's not reliant on it. We are still part of a global economy. Obviously, what the EU does and our free trade agreement with them is going to be absolutely essential, and I am in discussions with them on issues like rules of origin, which, to be honest, they're quite acute now. They're not specifically to do with that agreement, but actually to do with rising costs for production and for components.
Excellency, Secretary of State, we've run out of time, but we'll be talking about many of these issues over the next 2 days. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Shou Chew, CEO of TikTok, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde.
Wonderful to be here in this room. Wonderful to have you next to me, Shou.
Thank you for having me.
So I was going to start with the new story of growth being wherever I sit at the moment, and I'm biased because I cover technology in particular, being artificial intelligence. But then I knew there were a few elephants in the room that I felt we should address more immediately. So your company has just decided to sue the state of Montana in the United States because they want to ban the use of TikTok for new users, all users, by January the 1st, 2024. Why take that tack? How do you think you can fight this from a legal perspective?
Caroline, thanks for having me. We believe that the Montana bill that was recently passed is simply unconstitutional. And as you pointed out, we very recently filed a lawsuit to challenge this in the courts. And we are confident that we will prevail. separately, I've noticed that some of our creators have also filed a separate lawsuit challenging the same bill in the courts. And I do want to say that, they care because TikTok is really important to them. And this is the part of the story that I think is the most important part, of TikTok, which is that now that we have more than 150 million Americans on our platform on a very active basis, more than 1 billion around the world, people use TikTok as a place for expression. It's a very different experience, as you may know, from the other apps that are available in the market. This is one for discovery, for expression, for free expression. And a lot of our users use TikTok to find their communities, to discover, and to express themselves.
Yeah.
Moreover, there are 5 million small businesses in the United States that depend on TikTok, and millions more around the world, including here in this country and in the region. So I think, ultimately it is about providing value to these users and making sure that, we continue to provide them with a great service that benefits them. And that's, our key focus at this moment in time.
Expressing oneself, was that quite hard to express yourself most recently when you were in Congress, when you were having to try and tell your story of why TikTok is important to the United States?
I think it was a very important process, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to show up and to tell our side of the story.
Could you tell your side of the story?
Throughout the 5 hours, I believe I had time to do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good opportunity for us to explain ourselves, because there are some myths and misconceptions about our company out there.
Dig into them, because the key issue that many would have is data and the concern, the anxiety that ultimately the Chinese government can have access to US user data. That is why Montana is wanting to ban TikTok. What do you wish you could have said to make that land, that isn't going to happen? Because it felt as though you didn't manage to prove that point.
Well, TikTok is not available in mainland China today. As we said many times, the Chinese government has actually never asked us for US user data, and we will not provide, even if asked. Now, beyond that, we have built, over the last 2 years, something we call internally Project Texas. And what it really is to ensure that American data is stored on American soil by an American company and overseen by American personnel. And this is truly an unprecedented project that none of the other companies in our industry have ever attempted. And we believe that we have taken steps that are above and beyond what our industry has done to protect the safety of US user data, which is very important.
Where are you with Project Texas? Because there's been some reporting, and I know that you've come out and said very soon Oracle will have the unprecedented access to our data, or indeed to the ways in which of your source code. But that's not now. When will Oracle be able to enact this sort of unprecedented overseeing and transparency of your company?
Project Texas is a very complicated project, and a lot of the elements of the project is already in place and operational. For example, today, by default, all US data is stored in the Oracle Cloud servers already, in the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, and no longer in our own servers in Virginia and in Singapore.
You've already done that transfer?
It's already done by default, correct. Separately, Oracle has begun the review of the code, although it's, as you can understand, a complicated project that will take time for us to finish the details. So it's on track. Oracle and ourselves are working together with the US government to finalize the details of Project Texas.
There's also, I believe, Project Clover in Europe, which is a similar idea. And what's so interesting is your industry is grappling with this issue at the moment. The fact that we're sort of almost getting a nationalization, a sovereignty argument for data. And we've just seen Meta, which I know, the artist formerly known as Facebook, where you were once an intern, has just been issued a fine for keeping its data in Europe, or not, as the case may be. That's what's argued by the EU regulators. What do you make of this almost deglobalization that's occurring in technology?
I think this is a very important topic that you're touching on. Now, on the one hand, the internet is really built on this idea of global interoperability, and this idea that talent from around the world can connect very seamlessly with each other. And I think we've all seen the benefits of a very connected global internet over the last few decades. And I continue to be a big proponent of that. I think there's so many important elements of this global interoperability that needs to be preserved. Now, at the same time, there are conversations now in the EU, in the US, and in other countries around the world about what they call data sovereignty. Making sure that there are certain elements of the data. Data is a very big term, so we need to make sure that we are very specific about what we are talking about. Certain elements of protected data, for example, are stored and handled in a particular way in each region. And that's something that I believe we are ahead of the curve, because Project Texas in the United States is really sort of a project that deals with digital sovereignty in the US. And because we have so much learning from that project, we started Project Clover, a very, very similar project for Europe, starting a few months ago now. And the idea is very similar. We are building our data centers in Ireland, in Norway, localizing the storage of data in Europe, building additional data access protocols, but adapted for GDPR, which is the regulation within the EU. And we believe that this is an important conversation, and we are slightly ahead of the curve. And I think that we need to simultaneously address the concerns about and the desire for digital sovereignty, while making sure that we don't break the internet, that we don't balkanize this, and we continue to enjoy the benefits of a seamlessly connected global internet.
Do you think that argument can land? And in particular, do you think there's a point at which you're going to be able to turn to US Congress or an EU regulator and say, without doubt, there will be no backdoor to any government, whether it be the Chinese government or whomever wants to have their data? Like one previous, employee of ByteDance is currently saying does exist, a backdoor does exist for the Chinese government.
I just want to address that particular person left the company in 2018. So a lot of what he said is baseless from our point of view. But to your question, I think data security is a never-ending project. Any company that comes to you and says, we are 100% safe from any threats, is probably underestimating the problem, because threats can exist externally and internally, domestic or foreign. This is true for any company that deals with data at some scale. So what we commit to is that we will take this extremely seriously, that we will continue to invest to make sure that our data is as safe as possible. But to ask any company to promise that this is 100% safe from all threats, I think this is not something that any company can reasonably promise. Project Clover and Project Texas, we believe, are unprecedented projects that we're putting in place that will allow the data to not only be stored locally, but to be managed by local employees, and to have third-party local companies to give that system its monitoring. And this is something that goes above and beyond that any company in our industry has pursued so far. So we're confident that this is a very robust solution.
And you're using technology to try and fix a perceived problem. Where could artificial intelligence be used for moderation, as well as for content creation and news ways in which your creators can be producing video that much faster, for example?
The recent coverage on AI reminds me of this great quote that says something along the lines of, it took me 10 years to be an overnight success. So the industry has been developing and evolving for a very significant period of time. And we have incorporated some elements of machine learning, for example, in our recommendation algorithm. Our recommendation algorithm is just math.
Yeah.
And in order to process all these numbers across so many users, we need to leverage machine learning. So it is at the core of the offering that we are giving to our users. And it's good. People discover a lot of joyful content because of our recommendation algorithm. Now, beyond that, some of the latest developments, particularly by OpenAI and the ChatGPT product, could be very profound for productivity. There are many elements like content moderation, or creation as a creation tool for many of our users on our platform that could be unlocked with this new technology. It's very exciting.
I just want to go to our audience because you have control within this conversation. You can partake in a poll, for example. I want to put to you a question currently that we're wondering as to whether artificial intelligence will change the way in which you use social media in all its forms. Yes, it will be vastly changing your relationship with social media. You'll be making avatars left, right, and center. Maybe you already think AI is within the world of social media and it's already being leveraged. Or do you not think it'll change at all? I'm going to give you a moment to get into your app, give me your answer. But to that point, your own AI, you mentioned OpenAI there. Will you ever build your own large language model at TikTok? Would it be beneficial?
I think it's a very interesting development in the industry. And of course, there are many companies that are leading in this. And we're still in the process of making sure that we understand and study this. So that's the stage that we are at this moment in time.
Okay, being debated. There's a lot of optimism and hope around artificial intelligence. There's also a lot of caution and concern. How do you regulate it? How do you look at ensuring that this doesn't make people out of work? Or indeed, how do we ensure that perhaps the AI effects that I can use within TikTok doesn't make everyone think that anyone can be beautiful, anyone can be glamorous? I'm thinking of one particularly famous AI filter that you have, Glamour Filter. You are, I know, a man who thinks a lot about ensuring safety on the product. You're a man of 2 children who are eventually their world is created around technology. How safe and secure and built for a healthy relationship with technology do you think TikTok is?
This is a very important question. I think not only for us, but for people that will come after us. The current progress of AI is truly very exciting. It's fascinating. And from everything that we have seen so far, it could really quite profoundly improve our productivity across many, many things. It's a great tool for us to make our daily lives and our daily work a lot better, including the creation of videos. TikTok is about inspiring creativity and bringing joy. And you can imagine, using some of these creation tools for people to express themselves in a better way than before. One part of our product vision is a canvas to create. We have a window to discover, a canvas to create, and bridges to share. Now, in the creation part, if we give people more tools, I think you can imagine a world where it's easier for people to express themselves. So that's very exciting. What you mentioned is the risks. As with anything that's evolving so quickly, of course we should invest to understand the risks. And I think for AI, because it's so broad and so dynamic at this moment in time, it is important that we understand what the technology can do. Otherwise, it's very hard to put guardrails on something we don't understand. So yes, I do agree that some form of thoughtful, careful regulation is necessary to make sure that we're building guardrails, but at the same time, not killing off the innovation on something that could be so exciting for all of us.
And people are excited. Look, particularly when it comes to AI within social media, they think it will change social media. A lot, 73% of those in the audience do think that. How often at the moment, as the CEO of TikTok that is owned by a Chinese company, are people asking you about regulation in China of AI vis-a-vis in the US or globally, in the Middle East, in Europe?
I think these are important questions. We are still studying them across the world that TikTok operates in. But it's still very early. I personally think that it could be a mixture of rules and transparency and disclosure. Because for something that's evolving so quickly, a lot of times it is, you put in some guardrails and they could be quickly outdated, because of the evolution of the technology. So asking companies to be very forthcoming with disclosure, to be very transparent about what they're building, could be a very good way for us to better understand where the industry is headed.
Transparency, disclosure, a lot of what you're advocating to make people feel comfortable with TikTok, whether it be in Europe or the US. Do you have a plan B if you're banned in any state or country?
Now, we believe that, for an app that serves so many people around the world, that is so deeply impactful, not only on expression, but on people's ability to connect. I hear so many stories. Right before my hearing, I got a very nice message from one of our creators He's given me permission to talk about him. His name is Dylan Walker, and he told me that he lives with autism. And because of our platform, he has found his voice through music to connect with a community that he could not connect with before. And it's this kind of connections, this deeply impactful, positive impact that our product has on people that gives me a lot of confidence that we can have very thoughtful conversations with regulators around the world. And I'm confident that we are here to stay, not only because of the investments that we're putting in to keep the platform safe, but because of the impact it's having on the users themselves.
You've got 2 kids. Do you think they will come on, and would you be happy with them to interact with technology in the way that we do now as a society?
I think it's very important for the next generation to be digitally savvy, because they are going to live in that world. So, I mean, I don't want to speak for all parents. I think it's very important that parents make their individual decisions with their children. But for me personally, I'm very comfortable with my children getting more involved with understanding technology at an early age.
And using a TikTok product from 13 onwards, do you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Ultimately, do you feel at the moment, when it comes to the creator that you've become, 3.8 million followers that you have on TikTok and the like, are you able to express yourself there? Are you feeling any vulnerability there of your newfound fame?
Well, I think it's very fun to be able to express myself like that. And I've been playing around with a lot more sophisticated video editing. By the way, every single video that I post is that I go through the editing myself. It's very fun, and I think it gives me a stronger sense of community with our creators and our users. I do interact with them on the app as well. It's been fantastic. And I see you are on as well, so for those who are not following, please follow her.
Well, vice versa to you. I have slightly fewer followers than you, it must be said, but I do all the editing myself too. Cho, it was great to have some time with you. It went far too fast. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
Of TikTok, the CEO. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Of course, we've had some fascinating conversations, and that concludes, by the way, our morning sessions. The general lunch, sponsored by QNB, will be held just outside these doors in the networking space. We also invite you to join us for one of our lunch breakout briefings, also happening now in the Fairmont. Emerging markets and uneven recovery and the future growth story will be taking place in breakout room 1. If you're for global investment opportunities in high-growth sectors sponsored by Qatar Investment Authority, that'll be taking place in breakout room 2. And of course, lunch will be served there as well. Join us back here, 2:15, for our afternoon programming. See you soon. Sure. Let's do that. Popular now. Well, I'm already off stage.